Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 10 Man Collections. And today I'll be reading the chapter out of The Ghost of Southern Mountains in Appalachia by Nancy Roberts. And this chapter is called The Chain Gang Man. And it takes place in Decatur, Alabama. Sorry, I don't pronounce it right, but anyway. Here we go. It was Sunday morning, and he had been sitting on the porch of his pa's cabin back up in the Alabama hill country, strumming his guitar and singing to himself. Oh, hand me down that corpse of clay, that I may look upon it. I might have saved that life if I have done my duty. Wonder why he's singing that, but anyway. The tune was Barbara Allen and a sad one, but for some reason the 20-year-old boy with curly black hair and genuine blue eyes had always liked it. To his surprise, he saw a cloud of dust with a black Ford in the midst of it come Johnson along the seldom traveled dead-end road. Two lawmen got out of the car. You Lonnie Stevens? Yeah, I'm Lonnie. Then come with us, and if you come peaceable, you won't get hurt. That's some sort of act of suspicion right there, but anyway. Lonnie stood up in surprise and then took it for assent, but when they tried to put handcuffs on him, he fought hard. It was not until they subdued him that he found out why they were here. We know you done killed her, and you mought as well make a clean breast at it. Killed who? Cordelia. Ain't that your girlfriend? Dead? She can't be. It was your gun what shot her. We done identified it, that, and it was want no trouble cause you dropped it in the woods right near her body. Lonnie lifted both arms to bring the handcuffs down on the head of one of his captors, but the other lawman saw his intention and butted him in the side so that he lost his balance and fell to the ground. He resisted arrest all right. The man who had very nearly worn handcuffs on his head later testified at trial he was like a wounded bobcat struggling to get shed of a trap. Scared me, he did. Lonnie was broken-hearted over the murder of his sweetheart, but the law would not believe him. He hadn't killed her. He loved her, and they were planning to get hitched come summer. How could the law convict him for something he hadn't done? But it was his gun and his girl, and that was enough for the sheriff. When the judge delivered the sentence, it was 15 years on the chain gang. Lonnie was enraged, for he knew that the real murderer was out there free as a mountain rattler, while the best part of his own life would be gone. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but words, he thought, yes, words can hurt you, just the way you'll take a sharp knife to core an apple and throw the core on the ground to rot. That's what had happened to his life. Stuff like this actually happens in real life nowadays, and I'm going like, man, why don't they listen to him first and then look at the evidence and go like, wait a minute, if he says he didn't do it, they don't care. They just want to throw him away. Anyway, it was almost a matter of hours from that courtroom to the chain gang. He could scarcely get out of the big metal cage at the prison camp because of the chain and the steel cuffs around each ankle, and he almost pitched forward on his face when he took his first step. His smile made you feel like smiling back. His eyes crinkled up at the corners when he was amused, and his parents never had a lick of trouble with him. If anything, he was almost too soft-hearted and would expend hours trying to nurse an animal back to health when it might just turn out to be a slickly critter at best. Lonnie Stevens didn't act like a killer. It was his first day on the Alabama chain gang. Gripping the calves of his legs were leather straps meant to hold the steel cuffs up, but they still scraped his ankles. The chain between the cuffs were shorter than the man's steps and was designed to keep him from running. But for Lonnie, who was a tall fellow with a long stride, every step he took was like being in a sack race with a midget. Alabama had lots of rocks, and all he could think about was that he had lots of time ahead of him. When the man in the next cage passed the chain to him, the first night to put through his cuff and hand to the next man, he whispered as he turned to him, "Settle down, mountain boy. This is a hard rock camp, and you just going to make it tough for us." He couldn't sleep well at first because each time a man moved during the night, the chain tugged everybody else on the line. But he got used to it and to getting up with the men before daylight. He tried to join the others as they sung, "Water boy." They got to sing to get water, really? "Where are you hiding? If you don't come, gonna fetch your mammy." And then the faster chorus, "Gonna hit that rock, boys. From here to Macon, from here to Macon." At first he didn't join in, but soon he knew why the caveman sang. While they were working on the roads, singing was the only thing that seemed to ease the feeling of hurt inside. In the middle of the day, the guards handed out cans of beans, and the water boy came around with a dipper. The sun moved higher and higher overhead as he broke rock with the sledgehammer and rolled it to the pile with his bare hands. His shirt was drenched in perspiration and began to stick to his skin. Late that afternoon, he left the sledgehammer where he was breaking rock and went over for a drink of cold water. "Hey, you biggity mountain boy, don't you know to ask for water? See that stake? Get over there." His hands were tied high near the top of the stake, and he saw one of the sunburned, stubble-faced guards standing spread-legged in front of him with a wide leather belt that had holes in it. "Take that shirt off him," ordered the guard. Sometime during the whipping, Lonnie fainted. When he came to, the water boy was throwing water on his face, and his back hurt like nothing he ever felt before. He moaned throughout the night. As soon as his back got well enough and he could think about something besides the pain, he made up his mind he was going to either escape or be killed trying. While they were working on the road, they could look down in the valley and along the sides of the mountain and see the cabins where their blue chimney smoke drifted up. His friend Vester said, "Them ain't like other folks. They'll look out after us, help us if we can get there." First of all, I don't know why they got to take that much of a brutal punishment to prisoners, but it's like when you're in prison, they don't care. They go ahead and punish you. A week later, Lonnie was in the cage trying to read the only thing he had been able to bring with him. It was a small Bible Cordelia had given him after he had declared his intention to marry her. A guard named Guthrie entered his cage and looked up in surprise. "Take your dirty hands off the Bible. You ain't fit to touch it. You murdering," it's the B word, B-A-S-T-A-R-D, said he, and he kicked it out of Lonnie's hands. Lonnie didn't say anything out loud, but his mouth moved as he cursed Guthrie wordless, and he reached to pick it up. The man's trying to read a Bible, and he's a good guy. And you knock it out of his hand, thinking he's a murderer, but he's told you he's not. Good Lordy. Nobody don't believe him. Guthrie prompted to send him to the hole. Some of the prisoners called it the box because it was the severest form of punishment reserved for those who defy a guard. The box had a hard, rough wooden floor and was fitted inside with chains. It was less than 5 feet by 5 feet, too short to stand in and not long enough to lie down in. Twice a day they brought Lonnie a slice of bread and a cup of water. The only thing he knew he could do to keep from going crazy in the horrible discomfort and darkness was to put his mind on something else. Lonnie threw about Branch Corey. He knew Corey had taken a fancy to Cordelia and that the man was infruited because she had rejected him. Lonnie was sure that Corey had killed Cordelia and set it up so Lonnie would be blamed. Lonnie thought about somehow tolling him down to the creek where Corey had killed Cordelia and then choking him real slow. Didn't make no difference if they hanged him for it. It would be better spending the time on the chain gang. Then he began to think more calmly about how he could establish his own innocence and get evidence that would convict Branch Corey. Yeah, that's right. It'll be like, you thought you could get away with it, but you're going to go to prison for what you did. After that first day in the hole, he calmed down some and knew he could never kill anybody. But if his lawyer and members of his family hadn't found any clues to convict Corey, he would bring him to justice himself. He knew during his trial that the murder weapon had his initials on it, and it did look like one of his guns. Branch Corey had admired a gun of his that the fall before and asked if he could shoot it sometime. He had offered it to him then. Hadn't he gotten someone to copy the gun and scratched the initials on it himself? If he had only told his lawyer about this during the trial, it was dumb not to think of it, for it happened almost a year ago. About the time he had begun seeing Cordelia, oh, that was it. Even then, Corey probably began to think about what he would do to get revenge. He realized now that this confinement with no distraction was ideal for another purpose. He would spend it on something else just as important, figuring out the details of his escape. He could fade back into the mountains and never be caught by the law. Mountain folk was clannish, and even if the law suspected he was up there somewhere, they might decide it wasn't worth the risk to come and get him. One of his own family might be able to track down who made the copy of the gun and indict Corey, powerful as he was in the area. Gradually, his escape plan took shape. Vester and another friend named Thurmont could help. They would be working on that mountain road, and one day they would reach the right curve. The right curve would be where the front guard leading the line of 50 or 60 prisoners. Whew, that's a lot of them. Couldn't see far behind him. He could see the whole thing in his mind, the guard foreman walking in the middle alongside the men who would be spread out as they went around the curve. On the hard wooden floor in the pitch-black darkness of the hole that the days crawled past, but by the morning of the 17th day, when he was to get out, he had planned everything down to the last detail. They would overpower the guard foreman, take his pistol, and then keep him in front of the men. The guard in front wouldn't be able to shoot for fear of hitting the foreman. They'll shoot the guard in front in his legs if he didn't throw them his gun right off, and then they'd be gone. It had to happen fast, for guards working men under the gun never aimed a warning shot. They always shot to kill. An opportunity came less than a week after Lonnie was out of the hole and back on the chain gang again. The men were out working on the Alabama Highway 11. It was late afternoon, and Lonnie looked down to see blood on his shoe. The leg irons had begun to cut into his flesh on one ankle, but he disregarded it. Each day Lonnie and Vester had managed to station themselves about midway along the column. Today the lead guard happened to be Guthrie, whom Lonnie hated, and as usual, the foreman was patrolling about halfway up the line of the men. Cutting it into your flesh, I'd be like asking for medical attention, but he didn't care. All right, I think I'm going to read part of this page, and then I'm going to save the rest for part 2, okay? So here we go. The front third of the strung-up prisoners had rounded the curve when Lonnie gave the signal. Vester, who was a big, strong man in his early 30s, jumped the foreman, but the blow to the guard's head did not prevent him from letting out one terrible yell for help. It was heard by Guthrie, but it alerted the prisoners too, and since they knew the plan, they had the advantage and were able to fall back quickly before the startled Guthrie realized what was happening. When he did, he was looking squarely into the foreman's gun aimed at him and by Lonnie. "I ain't shot squirrel and deer all my life for nothing, Guthrie." He called out, "Throw me your gun." Guthrie hesitated, then threw it short of Lonnie and to one side when Lonnie went for Guthrie charged him. There was the sound of a shot, and the guard fell back dead. They took his keys with a desperate hobbling gait. The men reached the prison bus. The old bus sped down the mountain road with Vester at the wheel, driving as fast as he used to when he was running liquor. In about 50 miles, they were almost out of gas, and there was nothing to do but abandon the bus in the woods. Several of the men had files, and one of the Guthrie's keys had worked on the most of the leg chains except for Vester's. They needed to fan out to cabins in the area and find a change of clothes. In the truck toolbox, Lonnie discovered a file and began using it to quickly free his friend. Alright, part 2 is coming.